Do you think that that self-conscious or critical nature comes from? I know we all have self-image or self-conscious times.
Yeah.
Did you have a particularly difficult childhood, or?
Yeah. I had two of the most amazing parents I think anyone could ever have. But we lived in a small town, and I was a figure skater, which is not the coolest thing to do when you're a kid. You know?
As a guy.
I should have played hockey. And so, yeah, I was really teased at school for sure. I was really shy. A lot of factors. You know, I think those kind of injuries, even though people would never know that, people who know me now, they would never know that I was really shy and self-conscious.
Yeah, you don't come across as shy now.
That way. But, you know, the child within us is always there, and you can't change that child. I mean, you learn how to overcompensate and deal with things and process, put things to rest. But those innate kind of qualities, they're always going to be there, you know, and that's fine. I will tell you, though, I had a very gregarious dad. My dad was a show guy. He was short. He was super macho, George, and he loved attention, and he was funny, and he could sing, and he could dance, and he was a real attention-seeking
like a showman.
He was, and so was his mom, my nanny. I never called her grandmother. I always thought she should have been an actress. So there's qualities that we inherently are born with, you know, and that we have this. There's a genetic link there somewhere. There was no one in my family that comes from a quote-unquote performer's background or a necessarily creative career background. But I see where I get my talent from in the qualities that I knew in my parents. You know? And a lot of people have untapped abilities, right? Yeah. So, yeah, it's interesting.
Well, during the late 20s, your late 20s when you lost your parents, how has that affected you in the work that you're doing now?
You made me cry. Yeah. They're with me all the time. Like, I'll be halfway through a sentence. I'll be in a situation with a skater, good or bad, and I'll feel like my own voice is my dad's voice. And then by the end of the sentence, the phrase, or the next thought, I suddenly, you know, feel inhabited by my mother and how she used to think and how she used to react to things. So both my parents were incredibly nurturing. They were both totally different, and I'm not an only child. I said I have a sister who died, and I have a brother who lives, who's 13 years older. But I had an only childhood.
Because of the age difference.
Because of the age difference. There's 12 years and 13 years. So I had always both of my parents' focus.
Full attention.
Yes. You know, and I was a very thinking kid, and so, yeah.
You know, in Korea there's a word called han, which basically means deep sorrow. That people who are artists, creative people, everyone has some place that is just so sad that we've been through suffering, and that it's from that we draw inspiration to sing, write, dance. And do you feel that you're losing your parents when you were in your late 20s is a place that you go to draw some inspiration from to do the amazing work that you do?
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, that singing, the Han singing.
Yes, the pansori.
Yeah, the voice, like, because the program I did for Yuna, for a long program following the Olympic year, there was some of that voice in there.
Yes,
and it just,
the Arirang program.
It just rips. You know, it's so visceral, rips your heart out. You know, and I feel it so deeply, and I think, yeah. I think there's a collective experience too that culminates over generations. Like, for instance, my mother herself had a lot of tragedy in her life. You know, especially, you know, losing her daughter. And I've always been around that, and yet there was something so beautiful and happy about her in spite of that. So I'm comfortable with sorrow. I'm comfortable with that pain. Losing my parents was a nightmare. I was not ready.
Wow.
I was 27 when my mom died. I was 28 when my dad
May I
died.
ask how they died?
My mom had a buried aneurysm, so
Oh.
I had no preparation.
Mm-hmm.
She, I got a phone call. By the time I got to the hospital, she was in a coma, and 3 days later, she passed away. My dad died first. I get them switched. My dad died first, and it was a complication with super pneumonia,
Oh, wow.
a freak thing, and it took him over, and they had to Pavlinize him. And it just destroyed his lungs. And they literally went from being reasonably healthy people in their early 60s to being gone in a matter of days. My dad, it was 5 days.
Wow.
And they were both not conscious. My dad was Pavlinized, which means an artificial coma. They keep them under. And my mom was in a coma. So I didn't get any last words. And I was such a shishulala, overly loved child. And I was very emotionally dependent on my parents.
It must have been really hard not to be able to say goodbye.
Yeah. And I think after you go where you go, and then you have to survive. And you have to find a way. I mean, I draw so much of my strength. I think, ironically, I became so much stronger and so much more who I could be or was meant to be after losing them, And I think, some of my saddest moments are not being able to call them, after the Olympics with Yuna. And the moments I had with her once I finally saw her, and she came into the hotel room, and I gave her a big hug, and she put the medal around my neck, and the things that her mother said to me out of deep, deep, sincere appreciation that I couldn't call my mom. Like those times when I was backstage with Dorothy Hamill and calling my mom, or I couldn't, brag about it to my dad. Those are actually harder, But I was lucky to have them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you're lucky to have every moment that you can have.
Yes.
And life is a collection of, make the biggest collection of beautiful moments that you can. Get as much of it in as you can and stay as much as you can in the moment,
My father passed away when I was in high school, and it was one of those experiences where I also didn't get to say goodbye.
That's so hard for a teenage girl.
It's a really hard thing.
Your dad is your hero.
And I can totally relate to that feeling. And one of the things that I do feel now is that he is there every step of the way with whatever I'm doing. Yeah. And I know that there's that support, and I feel loved. I feel
it gives
cared
us confidence,
for. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when I'm on television, and when I'm doing my thing, and when you're doing your thing,
because he believed in you so much.
Yes.
So you finally found. Yeah. That's
exactly.
how I feel.
And to